Welcome to Build! Hi, everybody. Welcome to Build. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri. In 2016, television viewers were riveted by the first season of FX's American crime story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson. The Ryan Murphy-produced show took the extremely well-known O.J. case and injected new life into it by examining race and criminal justice in the 90s in a way that only hindsight could have allowed. This season, Crime Story attempts to do something similar with hindsight and the story of Gianni Versace, played here by our upcoming guest, Edgar Ramirez, and his murderer, the serial killer, Andrew Cunanan, played by our other guest, Darren Criss. Let's give them a round of applause, everybody. Before we get started, I want to remind all of our guests watching from home that they can leave a question with the Submit a Question button right next to the video. For now, let's take a look at American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace.
Shortly before 9 a.m., fashion designer Gianni Versace was shot on the steps of his villa.
Miami is now at the center of one of the largest FBI manhunts of all time.
For the second installment of American Crime Story, we're telling the story of Andrew Cunanan, a spree killer in the 1990s who climaxed with the very public murder of Gianni Versace.
This is a heinous and inexplicable crime.
Versace was very loved. Everybody who met him, they were fascinated by him, and nobody expected this.
He was a creator. He was a genius. But my brother is still alive as long as Versace is alive.
It is about the events leading up to the murder of Gianni Versace.
Gianni Versace. Versace.
Signore Versace.
But also, we're going to understand how that could have been avoided.
Suspect on the run in pursuit!
This particular manhunt is the largest failed FBI manhunt in history.
Andrew Cunanan, 27 years old, he's killed 4 men.
Why do you think he's now in Miami?
We don't know where he is.
People were scared. The fact that this man was killing gay men, still some people don't understand why it happened.
I'm Andy. So what do? I'm a serial killer.
For every season of American Crime Story, what we're interested in is what makes this an American crime, a crime America is guilty of, not just the characters we're exploring.
He's going to target closeted, older, wealthy homosexuals.
So you don't want to canvass South Beach as well?
Andrew's journey is a journey through the politics of homosexuality as they played across America in the 1990s.
You tell gay people you're gay and straight people you're straight.
I tell people what they need to hear. Versace has invited me to the opera.
Life is special.
Help!
Life is precious.
You've given him nothing.
That is how I feel.
I'm so happy right now. Truth is, you know, fear and prejudice, unfortunately, is always in fashion.
Everybody, please, Edgar Ramirez and Darren Criss. Fellas, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's such a cool trailer.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think it's a great primer for people who haven't seen it yet. Depends on, because of what they might be expecting after last season.
Yeah, I joke that a good trailer is kind of like auto-tune and Photoshop. They really make me look a whole lot better than I did on the day. Yeah, I'm glad that people are excited about it.
You're quite good in the show. I've watched 4 episodes. Both of you guys are great. Let's talk about inhabiting these characters and what you knew about them before going into this and what you learned about doing it. Talk about portraying Gianni Versace.
Well, I mean, Darren wasn't born yet when this went out. You were.
When was that?
Yeah, I mean, you were born, what, in 90?
Late 80s.
Late 80s. So, yeah, you were around, but not enough.
Yeah, not to consciously.
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah.
I was 19 when that all went down. And of course, Versace was a global icon at the time. So I do remember very well when he was assassinated and the turmoil that caused and the fear and how Miami changed forever after that moment. And yeah, it was you know what is really interesting is what we knew then and what we thought that we knew, what we understood of that crime at the time, and what will be revealed, you know, through the show. I mean, all the I think there will be a lot of redemption and also a lot of facts that will be righted through the show.
Go ahead, Darren.
I was going to say, did you wear a lot of Versace at 19? Were you into that? Was that your
Clearly, I could afford it. Yeah, I mean, it's like everything was Versace. I was 19, man. Yeah, no, nothing. No, I still don't. Yeah, I still don't. And I don't know. And after the show, I don't know if I will ever. So who knows? Yeah.
Talk about Andrew Cunanan and what you learned about him, what you could have learned about him. It's a really phenomenal performance.
Thanks,
what you're
man.
doing.
I mean, I actually, Edgar had a tougher mountain to climb, considering that this was a real person that had he had access to a lot of the people that were very close to him, and he had a huge, magnanimous profile between a lot of famous people that you could sort of derive from videos and stuff like that of interviews and stuff, really kind of getting to Johnny, whereas that was the complete opposite for me with Andrew, which almost is sort of freeing, because now I'm almost exonerated from an imitation, or not saying it was an imitation, but I don't have to worry about trying to. He's not somebody that people are familiar with, right? So it gives me more room to fill in a lot of blanks on my own.
But that said, I would say you're very much doing an imitation here, in the sense that he's constantly doing an imitation of
exactly,
a person.
and which brings me to my point, which is, sort of this meta quality of me imitating an imitator that already had so many different personalities on his own that it was just a matter of picking one and using whichever one seemed most useful to him at the time with whichever person and in whatever context. So
and there's also this element of him, and I think in your performance, where how good he is at imitating a person in different moments or in different scenes depends on the scenario that he's in and who he's talking to.
Exactly.
And so you have these wonderfully weird moments where, like, you're talking to a hotel clerk in one of the episodes, and he's sort of off the wall imitating someone here, and then you have another scenario where he's actually quite good at the imitation, and you could understand someone believing who he says he is in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different versions of Andrew. I'll boil it down to three. There's the actual Andrew Cunanan that walked and talked on this earth, who none of us will ever know or have any access to. The second one is the Andrew that I can kind of glean from Maureen Orth's book, which is the book that this entire series is based off of, which is a huge tome of accounts of people that knew him at all parts of his life. And then there's the Andrew Cunanan that is presented in the scripts written by Tom Rob Smith and the world created by Ryan Murphy. And at the end of the day, that's the one that I'm servicing. That is my guiding light. So no matter how well or not you knew him, it's almost irrelevant, because the narrative arc that interests me and the one that is my sort of master and commander is that, and that's the one I have to service as an actor. So that at the end of the day, that kind of it was nice that I didn't have to be like, oh man, I really hope I sound like Andrew on this one, or people who know him will watch and go, oh, that's just like him. That's not what it's about. It's finding the same emotional content that leads up to a lot of the actions that we know, and because there's so much we just don't know, and we'll never know. So it's not an expose on what really happened in that car ride or in that room or in that hotel. It's more about what are the emotional beats that we can play to somehow make sense of the things that we do now.
Well, no, it's an extrapolation of the story in order to service a greater point about this period of time and sexuality, homosexuality in this period of time, how it was viewed by the outside world, what it was like to be closeted, all of these sort of all these narrative strands of this moment. It does sort of for this period of time and for sexuality, it does what they did for race in the O.J. Simpson story. Yeah, I mean, they said that in the first look, so it feels like I might have stolen that. But that's what I got from watching it.
It's exactly what it is, yeah. And that's something that is really interesting, because it's predominant not only in Andrew's narrative, but Johnny's as well. Yes. And how, as this series progresses, we watch sort of the heroism that Johnny displayed with that advocate interview. You have this extremely successful public figure heroically coming out at a time when people in his of his pedigree were not doing that, and Johnny was the first to do that.
Yeah, no, and also when you look into this investigation, I mean, the element that always comes back to the surface is this, in the most 90s of ways, is this don't ask, don't tell, element to it. I mean, it was almost as through this investigation and by ignoring, by not really becoming a joint force in order to get this guy the message that somehow was being sent. It was basically a denial of a gay world out there, that basically there is a denial of sexuality. And the fact that Darren's character, Andrew Cunanan, was on a killing spree for so many months, his face was on the evening news night after night. Even I was in Venezuela at the time, and I remember Andrew Cunanan's face. But basically, he did not represent a public threat to the authorities at the time.
He was living openly in
Miami. I mean, he got there. I mean, he killed Gianni 9 days after he arrived to Miami. So basically, it's a crime that could have been prevented if people had paid more attention. So, and to think that only happened 20 years ago, is chilling and it's shocking. And I think that one of the elements that I rescue from the whole show, and that I hope that people walk away with, is to really pay attention, to that, to things that just happened 20 years ago, and to liberties, and to rights that can be taken away if you don't really pay close attention to them.
I would suggest paying very close attention to this show, because I think, unlike the last season of American Crime Story and really anything else on television, it takes a very big bet on the structure of the show and getting an audience to stick with that. And if they do, it's going to be very rewarding. But I have never seen a story told like this on television, be it anthology or limited series or anything like that. Did you know it was going to go in that direction when they pitched it to you?
I think we hoped and assumed it would, because it was nice joining the show with that first season having the credibility it did. I think I speak for both of us. We knew we were in good hands. I mean, Ryan's work obviously speaks for itself. So, we've said this 1,000 times, but what made the first show so interesting is that it wasn't necessarily. It's not about the OJ crime. It's about everything around it, and that's what makes these stories more interesting, because there's really something to discuss and talk about, and there's larger social implications of the work you're doing. So
I just mean in terms of the non-linear aspect.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, great answer.
Yeah.
But
wrong.
Because the thing is that basically what Tom Rob Smith and the team of writers wanted to do was to establish a parallel storytelling between the two characters,
right.
And in order to, because basically, this is the story of all the events that led up to Gianni's assassination, and it's based on a book written by Maureen Orth that basically explores all the investigation and Andrew Cunanan's journey until he got to Miami, because she was already involved in investigating this guy even before he killed Gianni.
Long before.
Exactly, long before. But it was when he killed the famous gay guy when then everybody started to pay attention. So, in a way, and this is something that I find so moving and so smart, from the script and from Tom's work, and it's that he sees these two characters as one force that is a creating force, and the other one is a destroying force, and he wanted to somehow put those forces in play and see how antagonistic they are to each other. I mean, they were both outsiders. They were both people looking from the outside in, but what did they do with that anger, with that thirst, with that hunger? Did they change the world, or they just those are the questions that the writers were placing all the time, and I think that is brilliant.
Yeah, I think something I was going to say earlier, as far as the negative implications of what homophobia sort of creates for a lot of our characters, is that what's interesting is that, and this is the reason why I brought up the Advocate interview where Johnny came out, is that they were fighting a lot of the similar obstacles, and Johnny came out triumphant. He had success, he had fame and glamour, and even at another element that would have been an obstacle, he got through that. He could be a public figure and not only be gay and proud, but have love in his life and have a devoted lover and a devoted person, where these were all the things that Andrew was also fighting against, but couldn't get through it and felt defeated by them and couldn't have love and couldn't have the success and the glamour. So it's amazing seeing these two very different people fighting the same demons, and just seeing the outcome of how a victory and a failure yields two different things.
And it makes sense that that's why we see his other victims at the beginning of each of their episodes at a moment of success or a high point in their life.
Right.
We see an incredible speech given by a wife, or we see a phone call that gave somebody a job, that they finally got a job or a project through, for which Cunanan is witness to at that moment, of everybody else being sort of to
around
succeed.
him. Yeah.
in spite of the thing that's going on within themselves, or the fact that they haven't come out yet or are uncomfortable with their skin, and he can't.
Well, I think
that.
Whereas Johnny exercised his power in creation. We were talking about destruction. I think another word for destruction, which is a more sort of accessible word to understand what we're talking about in the show, is Andrew, if he couldn't have it, he had to take it. And when you take a life, that is the ultimate arbitration of ownership. That is the ultimate, I am quite literally taking your life. If he couldn't have a lover, he had to take the life of that lover. If he couldn't have a symbol of wealth and power, he had to take that from somebody. And once that escalates, and we get more into the psychology of what happens when you kill somebody, once it becomes less and less symbolic, and it literally becomes about taking somebody's car, when it becomes as fundamental and basic as that, it gets to that. Yeah, so it kind of escalates, and obviously, Johnny was the penultimate version of that. The ultimate one being even his own life. I think Andrew, and this is a spoiler alert, when Andrew does end up taking his own life, I think it's a byproduct of wanting to take control of his own narrative. And if he's going to go to prison, or if he's going to be on trial, the only arbiter of his destiny that he wants to be in charge is himself. So that's, I think, the ultimate display of this obsession of needing to take something that is being taken away. And it's cool because you realize how obviously horrible of an outcome that can have, and how beautiful and moving in effect the other version of that desire to have control through creation, and how that can touch lives in very positive ways. And the juxtaposition of that in our show, I think, is really, really excellent, because you think on paper, like, Andrew Cunanan and Gianni Versace couldn't be more different. That's awful, but there are similarities that I think are quite important to recognize that raise much larger questions.
Similar
the context. I mean, because when one as you said, one was outing people and shaming them. So making something horrible out of a condition that they both shared. While the other one, Johnny, was empowering people and liberating people, and in the case of what he did, his legacy, he was mixing for the first time sexuality with fashion, something that no one did before, not at this scale. Before Gianni Versace's sexuality, sensuality, and glamour, they were on two different tracks, and he understood the rundown element and the sexuality from the 70s, and understood the money and the opulence from the 80s. And when he married the two in the 90s, everybody went crazy. So we wouldn't be able to be invited to the first row of a fashion show, of a runway, if it wasn't for a culture that Gianni Versace created 20 years ago. That is the reason why, we're dressing certain things. This mixture between celebrity and cinema and music, and this rock and roll approach to couture and to high fashion is something that he invented. And for better and for worse, we live in a time and in an era, this culture of the bling, this obsession for fame and celebrity, is something that he partially also helped to create. And then it's very interesting to see that a fashion designer had such a cultural impact. And I think that was important. It was important for the show to explore mainly the creative side of this character, in order to understand the great loss when he's gone and when he's disappeared and killed and assassinated by Andrew's character.
We love talking about this show and this story. We even working on the show, just talking about these characters, even subjective of actually working on it as a project, as I hope you feel. It's just endlessly fascinating. I'm sitting here going, yeah. Like we'll talk about this for hours.
We just finished basically, and we finished the one in December, like a few weeks ago. We're still in it, and we're still these conversations are almost like therapy for us.
Yeah, it's like the first time we really get to kind of talk about stuff when we're talking to media.
Characters therapy, like we're talking about the characters for the first time. It's not that we had. Your hair just grew from the last scene. I just could fit into this suit like a week ago, because I gained weight for the character. So we just came out of this show, So for us, this doing press for the character, actually, when people ask us questions, we
like to think about it and talk about it for the first time.
Because we're listening to ourselves, trying to
piece it all together.
What the process was.
Basically, you're our therapy. Thank you for being here for us.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
But even hearing you guys talk about there's things, and I think it's a great compliment to this show, is that it doesn't over-explain anything. Because there are things that you're talking about, it's like, oh yeah, that is in there. I didn't realize that at the time. Or there's other elements to it. And even when I was watching it, it is constantly something that is evolving and sort of telling you a different story as it progresses. It's not like it lays out its thesis in the first episode and then kind of keeps doing that. There's something more that to know about what they're saying about Andrew, what they're saying about Gianni as the show progresses.
Yeah, and also because he has a very another element that I rescue from Tom Rob Smith's work, a writer, is that every each episode, and that's why it really feels. I mean, sometimes I call it a film, I call it a movie because a movie because it's like a 9-hour-long film. It doesn't really have an episodic structure because each episode revolves around a theme. So that's like an act. So that is closer to a play or to a movie that to what we think, for the lack of a better term, episodic structure. So that is very interesting because then you can see all these elements, all these layers that we're discussing now. They're not really on your nose. I mean, they're not really there, like they're not preachy. They're just there for you to discover, because each episode surrounds, revolves around one subject, one theme.
Well, I would say that what makes it not episodic is the fact that you get to explore the lives of Cunanan's victims, versus where rarely do you kind of get that in stories like this. And in this, you really get to know each of the 5 victims.
Which I think is a really important part about our show. I think because Edgar plays a character and I play a character on the show, that we tend to talk about those people, but because the show isn't out yet, people don't realize that we do really examine the several victims of Andrew, for those people who aren't even aware that this isn't just about the murder of Gianni Versace. It's the 4 other men that he killed, and it's and those are stories and voices that I think up until now, at least in mainstream media, have pretty much remained in the shadows. And
it's kind of the great narrative surprise, I think, of the show. I'm unfortunately giving it away a little bit, but it doesn't become the sort of history of Gianni Versace and like a biography. It becomes this exploration of the victims of this sort of circumstance and scenario, and victims of the context.
Because it is
of the
not.
time.
It's the assassination. Actually, it's the longest title in television right now.
I know, promoting this has been tough.
It is the story of the assassination, and assassination has a very clear political overtone. Because he was assassinated, he was targeted, as all these guys were. So it is very important to keep that in mind as tomorrow night you start watching this show, because assassination is a very important word to understand the in a way the underlying element of the whole story.
We're having a very smart conversation about the show, but what was it? What did you think when they cast Ricky Martin alongside you? I had to. I got to do my job. I got to do my job, guys.
No, you should. You've got a good story about that, right?
Yeah. It was great. I mean, Ricky's he's a very good friend of ours. One of my best friends. We knew each other before. He was the first person that I told that I had that I had closed the deal on the show. We were supposed to see these galleries in LA, and then suddenly I'm talking to my team and said, "Are we on? We're on." And then I get into the gallery. Hi, Ricky. Hi, how are you? And by the way, I'm doing Versace. Oh man, that's so great. Blah blah blah. And I'm so proud of you. So great. Yeah, congratulations. And then about a week later, then Ricky texted me and said, "Guess who am I having dinner tonight?" And I said, "Who?" Ryan Murphy. And I said, "You're gonna be Antonio." I said, "What? You're gonna be Antonio? I'm sure he's gonna offer Antonio to you." And then they got together, and then Ricky asked.
Has there been any talk about it beforehand, or was that a complete surprise?
Nothing. No. And Ryan didn't know that we were close. I mean, there was no previous conversation about this. And then they're having dinner, and towards the end of the dinner, then he says, "Well, I mean, I would love you to play Antonio." Well, that's so great, blah blah. Who's playing Donatella? Because he knew who was playing Gianni, and then Penelope Cruz is playing Donatella. Wow, that's amazing. And then, okay, Ryan, I have to tell you, Edgar and I are close. We're friends, and I know that he's playing Gianni because he told me. And then Ryan cried. He says, like, "This is what I wanted, to have this level of compassion and closeness that really helped, to build the story." And he's an amazing actor, and he's got a great. I mean,
he's a great.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
I will say, as the Broadway guy between the two of us, I've always known Ricky's a good actor. Ricky has a very illustrious Broadway resume. He's a good actor, and I think people tend to be surprised. They tend to forget that that singers and performers are actors too. They are showmen, and Ricky is. I think people who are really effective, great artists and performing artists are skilled beyond. Yes, he can sing. He can shake his proverbial bonbon, but I think he can also, all that is connected to knowing how to connect to an audience and how to make people feel things. And so when you see him on set, you're like, oh, that's of course, you're a wonderful actor. And yeah, I mean, it was very, very, very obvious on set and on camera too. He looks great. So yeah, Ricky's. I think the two of you are wonderful in it. I think you're really, really great. It's very moving to see that relationship between the two of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question? Who do you have? Oh, hi. You have a microphone.
Hi. Hola, Edgar.
Hola.
Hi, Darren.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means hi.
Oh,
I'm Venezuelan.
It means Edgar, not you.
Oh, okay.
I'm very proud of you, of
Thank
my
you.
country.
Thank you so much.
What's the best advice that your father give it to you? What's the best advice that you ever received from a professional mentor? Sorry, my English.
Yeah, no, please, it's okay.
Right. Sorry, my English.
Yeah. The best advice that I got from my dad, to be polite to everyone.
Similarly, I'll use my dad, I guess, as well, because it's a mentor as well. No, yes, it's basically the same, except it's worded like a true car salesman. My grandfather was actually a Cadillac salesman, which sounds skeezy, but
cool.
think of the charming
that's
side
cool.
of that. And he used to say, "Everyone's a customer." Everyone's a customer. And while that sounds like a cheesy car salesman's line, you can apply much bigger ethos to that, which is, at any time, anybody is somebody that it has value. Everybody has value.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Next question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
If you could meet Gianni Versace himself, what would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Well, I don't know about you, but
man, I have a lot.
Yeah. No. Wow.
Do you want to think about it?
I mean, it's like that. It's that moment where you say that, like, where you have. Wow. I don't know. That's a very moving question.
You're gonna think of such a good answer in like 6-7 days.
I don't know, man. Yeah, in 6. Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna wake up in a cold sweat at night.
I will tweet it in 6 days. What would I ask him? God, I don't know. You go.
I sort of had this very profound moment when I walked into the house dressed as Andrew Cunanan, recreating the scene that defines this television show and defines the end of Johnny's life and reign, where seeing both sides of everything, it is without question, obviously, what Andrew did is horrible and deplorable, and just that's obvious, right? I hope that given all of the things we know about Andrew and the circumstances around him, I wouldn't ask for forgiveness, and I wouldn't ask for. I'm not trying to pardon anything that has happened, but I would hope that Johnny would understand what we were trying to do. I would hope that he would understand the larger social issues that we were trying to discuss, and I would ask him to kind of, I guess, see that we're trying to create some kind of light out of an overwhelming amount of darkness. That this isn't trying to exploit anything. We're not trying to sensationalize a death and a series of deaths or glamorize somebody who's done monstrous things, but we're trying to understand the darkest parts of not only this person, but our society as a whole. And it's much bigger than these events. And I would hope that I would want to tell him we're trying to create light out of darkness. Because if it was just about the darkness, then there's no point. And I think as a lover of life and beauty and creation, I think he would understand that. I would hope he would. I don't know, but that would be the conversation I'd love to have with him.
Well, That is basically what I do hope that the family feels. And when the cat is finally out of the bag tomorrow night, and the whole world, starting with the U.S. tomorrow, starts to see this series that
on FX,
and on all different channels and networks all over the
world.
But that everyone, and I can speak on behalf of everyone, not only the cast but everyone involved in this project, that we walked into this with utmost respect and utmost compassion for these characters. Yeah, and for the tragedy that this family went through.
I'll also add that in no way does the show attempt to sympathize with Cunanan, or it mostly, from what I've seen, presents a context for why this could have happened, or for why this happened at this point in time.
Right, and the idea is to leave the audience with, I don't think I'm directly asking for empathy or understanding. I think, the show begs questions, and then from there you can decide for yourself how you feel about it, or what you want to take from the show. But yeah, I think that would be the goal of the show. I hope that it's not hitting you over the head with any particular rhetoric. It's just kind of presents everything on a table and lets you kind of take it from there.
Next question.
Hey, Darren.
Hey, bud.
I just wanted to ask you, what was the hardest thing about getting this role for you together for you, and what's the difference in the preparation of this role compared to something so big as Hedwig for you that has a similar kind of role for you?
Well, the thing I like to remind people, and this is not to put anybody down. I said it once, and it sounded mean-spirited. The thing that I think audiences tend to forget, which is a good thing actually, is that actors act, that we're acting, and it is a. I kind of roll my eyes at this sometimes, but it's true. It is a craft, and I treat all characters with the same amount of due diligence. That each project is equal to the same amount of currency, So yes, somebody like Blaine existed in a lighter, funner, more surreal world, and he followed certain rules that existed in a very, very different world than somebody like Andrew, which is a very dreary, complex world. But that doesn't mean that one is more significant than the other. You're still boiling everything down to the same common denominators: fear, pain, love, desire, all the same things that we can all relate to no matter how we live our lives. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's me just diving into the similarities between me and something else, because you have every character, every person, everybody on this planet is the hero of their own story, So you just have to jump into that mindset of, okay, well, even no matter how far or close I am to somebody, you find the primary colors between you and that person, and then that's what makes those crazy actions. We go, oh my God, how could you reenact this act? Well, you go, well, I make sure to get in touch and have access to the emotions that we all have access to, because we are all capable of horrible, dark things, but we're all capable of beautiful, moving, wonderful things simultaneously. How cool is that? So it's just making sure that you can embrace those seedlings of those dark things, and then kind of riding the wave into the breakers. That's kind of my thing.
What did you find were the primary colors?
Very simple things. Who doesn't know what it feels like to want something that you can't have, to want to rise above your station, to prove something to people, to be liked. Now these all vary in degree. We all try and execute this in different ways, all based on where we're from, where we live, what time period. There's so many things that have an effect on those desires. One thing that I really do relate to Andrew is, I as a kid, I did revel in being different. I enjoyed, for very different reasons. I think he liked being different to make himself better than people, or somehow rise above people. I like being different from people because I just didn't want to be like everybody else. It was a celebration of it was my own rebellion of individuality. And not saying I was like a rebellious kid, but just wearing that funky thing, or saying that weird thing, or just being slightly different from people was a form of expression to me. A really great example that is cited a lot is that Andrew wore, his friends that knew him in school when he was much younger said he was the kind of kid that wore dimes in his penny loafers. If everybody else wore pennies, then he would wear dimes. And I immediately went, I totally understand that. I get that. I understand that very simple, very childish, very sweet effort to be stick out, to be different. Again, we have very different reasons for it, but I know the desire. And so once you connect to those things, everything else can kind of follow suit.
Edgar, what would you say were the primary colors between you and Gianni? If that's your process, where you look for those types of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, you always have, because you have to. I mean, you have to establish empathy with your characters. So it's always very important to find those bridges. And I think that it was love for our family. I mean, he was the ultimate family man. I mean, he was very family oriented, and that is something that I really connect to. He was a protector, and he had a very, very, very special, very strong relationship with his family, especially with his sister, with Donatella, that Penelope Cruz portrays so brilliantly in the show, and Penelope also has a very, very close relationship to her siblings. I have it with my sister, so that was we found there. I know that both of us we found a very strong connection, very similar colors, so to speak, in that regard. Because in the end, I mean, underneath all the colors and all the bling and all the flashy elements and all the exuberance and the beautiful house and the fabrics and the shine, I mean, what you have there is a family that basically they started this little business, a little shop in Reggio Calabria in southern Italy, and they took it to the world. So they never really, it's not, I mean, they never left Reggio. They took Reggio Calabria to the entire world. And that is something that I can also relate to. I mean, as a Latin person, raised Catholic, I relate to those things. I mean, the family values and also the miracles. The belief in miracles. That there was something miraculous, and you'll see because I know how many episodes you've seen. So you'll discover this more. As you progress in the show, that the Versace family and Gianni's life was filled with miracles and a high sense of fate and that is something also where I found a lot of similarities. This belief, that this optimism and belief that things are gonna be better, that are gonna be alright, although tragedy strikes them when they least expect it. Yeah.
Only because I feel like I didn't answer the question. I also want to know what Edgar is thinking as far as what the hardest part was, and I sort of answered another thing, which I tend to do. I apologize. I think just technically speaking, because we were shooting backwards, we had to play a lot of chronological and emotional Tetris with figuring out, okay, well, we're shooting this moment, which is an amalgam of moments we haven't done yet, which is the case with most films, but at least it's in a contained space of at least like a 2-hour film, where this is a 9-hour film, and so we're shooting moments that are based on moments for scripts we don't have yet. So that was a little difficult for me, but it's fun because you're not playing what happens, you're playing the emotional things that make those things happen. So that was a little difficult, but a fun challenge.
And also, maybe you don't have to think about this as actors in the scene, or maybe you do think about this, but even though you're shooting backwards, it doesn't mean that there still has to be a tonal presentation of what's going to come forwards. You still need to be sort of projecting or foreshadowing all the things that are coming afterwards chronologically in real life.
Sure.
Because part of the horror of the show is that what happens at the end of all of this. Right. So when we're in episode 5 and we're looking at everything being told backwards, we should still be thinking about what we saw in the first episode.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if that even applies to what you're doing in this scene.
It sort of does. I mean, something Edgar said that we... again, this is sort of a spoiler. Their meeting is the question people always ask about. Did they actually meet? Did that ever happen? We think it did. And the way we tell the story, we'll let the show speak for itself, the scene speak for itself. But we, for obvious reasons, didn't have a lot of time together, at least on camera. We spent a lot of time together off camera. But something that really helped about this one particular scene is that it sort of set a precedent for both of us throughout all of our stuff alone, because every moment throughout the show kind of has implications on to that scene and everything else. Yeah. So that kind of speaks to what you were saying as far as you've seen moments that as you even go the other direction in time, they still have you start to realize how much of an effect, not necessarily what happened, but the way they present themselves is such a, I guess, a benchmark for kind of who they are at their core throughout the show. And even though we didn't have scenes, we both had that scene in mind for other scenes with other people.
Which also happened to be our first scene in the film.
That's a nice story.
You know, so it was the first time that I walked into
the arena
the show, and that I put on my prosthetics, and that I became Gianni Versace and he became Cunanan.
Is this the club or is this the opera?
No, the other one. Don't say it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's the other one.
Yeah.
Got it.
That was the first time.
It's the one where we go to the zoo.
That we try exactly where they are.
The animals
where
are
they're eating
beautiful.
candy.
Good.
Together. So no, the thing is that that was the first scene, the first time that we were, you know, both Andrew and Gianni, and that we worked together for the first time. It was everything the first time. And yes, as he said, I think that scene has all this kind of like we talked about it last week, these Eastern, you know, eggs.
Easter eggs. Easter eggs.
Again, I said
yeah,
Eastern
it's okay.
again.
Sorry, the man speaks 5 languages.
Easter,
it's okay. Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. Element, like to find those eggs and to find those hidden elements that will connect to these characters throughout the whole show. So there will be things that will happen to them individually that somehow you will feel that they reflect elements that were presented in that sequence, which is actually more of a scene, it's a sequence. Yeah.
Guys, I love it. Congratulations. I think it's one of the best things on television right now, if
Thank
not one
you.
of the most fascinating and strangely put together, which I think is really daring and smart, and I can't wait to watch the rest of it. It premieres tomorrow night on FX, right? 10 p.m.
10 p.m.
Check your local listings.
Exactly, yeah.
And is that a thing anymore?
I don't know. I kind of hope it
is.
is. I want it to be, so keep saying it.
Guys, give it up for Edgar and Darren. Let's hear it.
Thank you.